December 26, 1996. Boulder, Colorado. The snow-covered streets were quiet. The Christmas lights that decorated homes across the neighborhood were still glowing. Families were waking up, preparing for another day of holiday celebrations, unaware that just a few miles away, a tragedy was unfolding inside one of the city's most recognizable homes. Inside the Ramsey residence, the morning began with panic. A child was missing. A 6-year-old girl named JonBenét Ramsey. At approximately 5:52 a.m., a call was placed to emergency services. On the other end of the line was JonBenét's mother, Patsy Ramsey, speaking with urgency and fear. Her daughter was gone. A ransom note had been discovered. Someone, the note claimed, had taken JonBenét and demanded money for her return. The amount requested was $118,000. The message warned the family not to contact police. But police had already been called. And within hours, the case would take a shocking turn. Because investigators would discover that JonBenét Ramsey had not been taken from the home. She was inside the house. Dead. What followed was not just a murder investigation. It became a national obsession. A case filled with unanswered questions, conflicting theories, forensic debates, and decades of speculation. A case that continues to raise the same haunting question. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? Before her name became known around the world, JonBenét was simply a young girl growing up in Boulder, Colorado. She was born on August 6, 1990, to John and Patsy Ramsey. Her father, John Ramsey, was a successful businessman who had built a comfortable life for his family. Her mother, Patsy, had previously been a beauty queen and was known for her involvement in her daughter's activities. The Ramsey family lived in a large home in an affluent neighborhood. From the outside, their life appeared like a picture of success. They had financial stability. They had a loving family. And they had 2 children. Their son, Burke, was 9 years old. Their daughter, JonBenét, was 6. Those who knew JonBenét described her as energetic, confident, and full of personality. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and performing. She participated in child beauty pageants, where she wore costumes and performed on stage. The attention surrounding those appearances would later become one of the many subjects debated after her death. But to her family, she was not a public figure. She was a child. A daughter who loved Christmas. A little girl who enjoyed playing and spending time with her family. The Christmas of 1996 was expected to be a happy one. On December 25, the Ramsey family attended a holiday gathering with friends. The evening appeared ordinary. There were conversations. There was food. There was the excitement of Christmas morning approaching. Later that night, the family returned home. According to the family's account, JonBenét was tired and went to sleep. The next day, they were planning to travel to Michigan to visit relatives. Suitcases were being prepared. Travel plans were being arranged. The house was filled with the normal signs of a family preparing for a trip. Nothing suggested that the following morning would become one of the most disturbing days in Boulder's history. But sometime during the night, something happened. Something that investigators would spend years trying to understand. The exact timeline of events inside the Ramsey home remains one of the biggest mysteries of the case. Investigators have attempted to reconstruct what happened during those early morning hours, but many questions remain unanswered. At some point before sunrise, JonBenét was killed. But by whom? And why? The first major clue discovered that morning was a handwritten note. Patsy Ramsey later stated that she found the message on a staircase inside the home. The note was unusual. It was not a short demand. It was several pages long. It contained dramatic language and instructions for the family. The writer claimed to represent a group and demanded payment for JonBenét's return. The message warned the family not to contact authorities. But the details of the note immediately created suspicion among investigators. The paper came from inside the Ramsey home. The pen used to write it was also found inside the house. And the amount requested was highly specific. $118,000. Detectives discovered that the number closely matched a bonus John Ramsey had received from his company. That detail became one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the entire case. How did the writer know that amount? Was it someone familiar with the family? Was it information that had been discovered through another source? Or was it simply a coincidence? The ransom note would become one of the central mysteries of the investigation. When Boulder police arrived at the Ramsey residence, they believed they were dealing with a kidnapping. Their first priority was finding JonBenét alive. Officers searched the house. They checked possible hiding places. They looked for any evidence that someone had entered or left the property. The home was large, with multiple rooms and levels. At first, investigators focused on the possibility that an unknown person had taken the child. But as the morning continued, the situation changed. A devastating discovery was made in the basement of the home. JonBenét Ramsey was found. She was not missing. She had never left the house. The investigation instantly changed. The police were no longer searching for a kidnapped child. They were investigating a murder. A 6-year-old girl had been killed inside her own home. The place where she should have been safest. The place where her family had celebrated Christmas only hours earlier. As detectives began processing the scene, they faced a complicated investigation. There was no obvious suspect. There was no clear motive. And the evidence appeared to create more questions than answers. The basement became one of the most important areas of the investigation. Forensic teams examined the location carefully. They collected evidence. They documented the scene. They attempted to determine what had happened during the final moments of JonBenét's life. The medical examination revealed that JonBenét had suffered serious injuries. The official cause of death was determined to be strangulation, along with other injuries. The findings confirmed that this was not an accident. A crime had taken place. The challenge for investigators was identifying who was responsible. Almost immediately, the case attracted national attention. News organizations across the country began covering the story. The image of a young child who had died during Christmas became impossible for many people to forget. Reporters gathered outside the Ramsey home. Cameras followed every development. Every statement made by investigators and the family was examined closely. The pressure on law enforcement increased. The public wanted answers. The media wanted information. And investigators were working with a crime scene that would later become heavily criticized. One of the biggest challenges was that the house had not initially been treated as a homicide scene. Because authorities believed they were responding to a kidnapping, people were allowed inside the home. Family friends came to support the Ramseys. Officers moved through the property. Areas were searched before investigators fully understood the nature of the crime. Later, experts questioned whether this may have affected the preservation of evidence. For detectives, the case was becoming increasingly complex. They had a victim. They had evidence. But they did not have a clear path to the person responsible. And as the investigation continued, two major possibilities began to emerge. Was JonBenét killed by someone who entered the home? Or was the answer hidden among the people who already knew her? The search for the truth had only begun. As investigators continued examining the Ramsey home, they began building a timeline of what may have happened during the hours between Christmas night and the discovery of JonBenét's body. But creating that timeline proved extremely difficult. There were gaps. There were unanswered questions. And there were conflicting interpretations of the evidence. The first major theory investigators explored was the possibility of an intruder. The idea was that someone unknown had entered the Ramsey home during the night, attacked JonBenét, and left behind the ransom note as a distraction. Supporters of this theory pointed to several details. The house was large. There were multiple possible points of entry. A basement window had been found damaged, and some investigators considered whether it could have been used by someone entering or leaving the property. The possibility of an outsider committing the crime remained a major part of the investigation. But the intruder theory also raised difficult questions. Why would someone spend so much time inside the home writing a lengthy ransom note? Why would they leave behind evidence? Why would they take the risk of remaining inside the house after committing the crime? These questions continued to divide investigators and experts. Another major focus of the investigation was the Ramsey family themselves. Because JonBenét was found inside her own home, detectives naturally examined the people closest to her. This did not mean guilt. It meant investigators were following standard procedures in a homicide case. Family members, friends, and anyone with access to the home became part of the investigation. John and Patsy Ramsey gave interviews and provided information about the events of that night and morning. Their behavior was closely watched by the public and media. Every reaction was analyzed. Every statement was examined. But public suspicion is not the same as evidence. Over the years, no member of the Ramsey family has ever been convicted of JonBenét's murder. The intense media coverage surrounding the case created a situation unlike many investigations before it. The public formed opinions quickly. Television programs debated theories. Newspapers published daily updates. Millions of people around the world followed the investigation. The case became a symbol of the challenges that can happen when a tragedy unfolds under constant public attention. As detectives continued their work, they focused heavily on physical evidence. One of the most important pieces remained the ransom note. Handwriting experts examined the document. They studied the writing style, the wording, and the unusual details included in the message. The note appeared to contain information that suggested the writer knew something about the Ramsey family. But determining who wrote it became one of the greatest challenges in the investigation. Some experts believed the note contained characteristics of someone attempting to create a false kidnapping scenario. Others argued that the unusual details could have another explanation. The debate continued. Another major area of focus was forensic evidence. At the time of the murder, DNA technology was not as advanced as it is today. However, biological evidence collected during the investigation would later become a significant part of the case. As forensic science improved, investigators returned to evidence from the crime scene. The hope was that new technology could reveal information that had been impossible to discover in 1996. Years after JonBenét's death, DNA testing became one of the most discussed developments in the case. In 2008, prosecutors announced that DNA evidence did not support the involvement of John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey. The announcement was significant because the Ramsey family had faced years of public suspicion. The official statement cleared them from suspicion based on the available DNA evidence. But clearing individuals did not answer the most important question. Who is responsible? The case remained open. And investigators continued searching for answers. Throughout the years, several individuals became connected to the investigation. Some attracted attention because of statements they made. Others became suspects because of circumstances surrounding them. But many leads ended without producing charges. One of the most publicized moments came in 2006 when John Mark Carr claimed responsibility for JonBenét's death. Carr made statements that attracted worldwide attention. He claimed he had been present when JonBenét died. The announcement created a media frenzy. News cameras followed the story. Many believed there had finally been a breakthrough. But investigators soon found problems with Carr's claims. Evidence did not support his confession. DNA testing did not connect him to the crime. Ultimately, he was not charged in relation to JonBenét's murder. For many observers, the incident demonstrated how difficult the investigation had become. The case had attracted attention from people making claims, theories from the public, and countless interpretations of evidence. But none had produced a conviction. The years continued to pass. The Ramsey home became a symbol of an unsolved mystery. The case appeared regularly in documentaries and television specials. New investigators reviewed old evidence. Experts offered new interpretations. Technological advances created new possibilities. But the identity of JonBenét's killer remained unknown. For the Ramsey family, the years brought continued grief and frustration. They faced the loss of their daughter while also living under intense public examination. Their lives became permanently connected to a crime that the world continued discussing. For Boulder, Colorado, the case also left a lasting impact. A community known for its peaceful image became associated with one of the most famous unsolved murders in America. The investigation changed how many people viewed child homicide cases. It highlighted the importance of protecting crime scenes. It showed how difficult it can be to separate facts from speculation when a case receives enormous public attention. And it demonstrated the challenges investigators face when evidence is limited, unclear, or open to interpretation. Decades after that Christmas night, the search for answers continues. The case remains active. Evidence remains under review. Investigators continue to receive information. And the possibility remains that new technology or new information could eventually reveal the truth. But beyond the investigation files and the unanswered questions, there is one fact that remains unchanged. JonBenét Ramsey was a child whose life ended far too soon. Before the headlines. Before the theories. Before the endless debates. She was a 6-year-old girl with dreams, a family, and a future. Her story became one of the most recognized mysteries in modern criminal history. But the tragedy behind the mystery is that a young life was lost, and the person responsible has never been held accountable. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey reminds us that every unsolved case represents more than evidence and investigation. It represents a person, a family, and a search for justice that continues long after the cameras leave. The question that began on a cold December morning remains unanswered. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? And will the truth ever finally come to light? The years following JonBenét Ramsey's death brought more questions than answers. For investigators, the case became a reminder that solving a crime is not always about finding one single piece of evidence. Sometimes it is about understanding how thousands of small details connect. Sometimes it is about waiting for technology to catch up with evidence collected years earlier. And sometimes it is about revisiting the past with a new perspective. The Ramsey investigation continued through changing generations of detectives. Some investigators retired. New officials reviewed old files. Forensic experts examined evidence using methods that did not exist in 1996. Each new review brought renewed hope that the mystery surrounding JonBenét's death could finally be solved. But each time, the same obstacle remained. The evidence raised questions, but it did not provide a definitive answer. One of the most debated aspects of the case has always been the question of who could have known enough about the Ramsey family to create such a detailed crime scene. The ransom note contained unusual wording. The requested amount was specific. The location of the crime suggested familiarity with the home. These details led investigators to consider whether the person responsible had knowledge of the family. But exactly how that knowledge was obtained remains unknown. Over the decades, countless theories have emerged. Some theories focused on a possible outsider. Others focused on people connected to the Ramsey household. Some were based on forensic interpretations. Others were based on behavior, timing, or personal opinions. But theories are not proof. A theory can suggest a direction for an investigation, but only reliable evidence can establish responsibility. That distinction became one of the most important lessons from the Ramsey case. The intense public attention created a situation where speculation often moved faster than facts. Millions of people followed the investigation. Many formed strong opinions. But the truth of a criminal case must be determined by evidence, not by public belief. The case also changed the way law enforcement agencies approached major investigations involving children. The first hours after a crime occurs are often the most important. Preserving evidence. Controlling access to the scene. Documenting every detail. These steps can determine whether a case is eventually solved. The Ramsey investigation became a widely discussed example of the challenges that can occur when the nature of a crime is not immediately understood. In the years after JonBenét's death, her family continued living with the consequences of the tragedy. They lost a daughter and sister. They also experienced years of public attention and scrutiny. Their lives became permanently connected to a mystery that millions of people wanted solved. For the community of Boulder, the case became part of its history. The neighborhood where the Ramsey family lived became recognized around the world. People traveled to see the location connected to one of America's most famous unsolved cases. But behind the media attention was a community dealing with a painful reality. A child had died. A family had suffered a devastating loss. And justice had not yet been reached. The passage of time has not erased the importance of the case. Instead, it has created new opportunities for investigation. Modern forensic science continues to develop. DNA analysis has become more advanced. Cold case investigators now have tools that were unimaginable decades ago. Cases once considered impossible to solve have been reopened and resolved because of scientific progress. That possibility remains one of the reasons investigators continue to examine unsolved cases like JonBenét's. A single discovery. A new forensic technique. A previously overlooked detail. Any of these could potentially change the direction of an investigation. For the people who still seek answers, hope remains. The story of JonBenét Ramsey is not only about a crime scene or a mystery. It is about the importance of remembering victims as people. Before she became a name known across the world, JonBenét was a child. She had favorite activities. She had a personality. She had people who loved her. Her life cannot be defined only by the tragic circumstances of her death. The investigation may continue for years to come. There may be future developments. There may be new evidence. There may eventually be answers. But until then, JonBenét Ramsey's story remains one of the most haunting reminders of how deeply an unsolved crime can affect families, communities, and an entire nation. A Christmas morning that should have been filled with happiness became a moment remembered forever. A 6-year-old girl became the center of a mystery that has lasted decades. And a question that began in a quiet Colorado neighborhood continues to echo. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? For every cold case, there is a hope that the truth is still waiting somewhere. Hidden in evidence. Contained in memories. Waiting for the right moment, the right technology, or the right person to finally reveal what happened. Because behind every investigation file is a life that mattered. Behind every headline is a family searching for peace. And behind every unanswered question is the possibility that one day, Justice may finally arrive.